I'm Lauren Bennett, 36 years old, and I never imagined I'd be the only family member seated next to the recycling bins at my own parents' 40th anniversary party. I drove 6 hours to get there, spent nearly $300 on a handcrafted gift, and ended up eating cheese puffs in what used to be a garage. My mother smiled and said it was just for extended family. That's when something inside me finally gave way, not in anger, but in clarity. I had spent a lifetime trying to belong to people who barely noticed I was there. That night they showed me exactly where I stood. Before I go any further, let me know where you're listening from in the comments, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been the afterthought in your own family. I grew up in a small town in southern Idaho, the middle child in a family that didn't seem to have much space for middle anything. My older sister Rachel was the golden one. Straight A's high school homecoming queen, married her high school sweetheart, became a pediatrician, and gave my parents 3 blonde-haired grandbabies, all before she turned 30. She lived just 2 streets over from our childhood home, and my mother talked about her like she was royalty. Then there was my younger brother Dylan, the baby, the only boy. He could crash my dad's truck or get caught smoking weed behind the church gym, and it was always brushed off with a chuckle and a boys will be boys. My parents were quick to bail him out every time, always another second chance, always another rescue. And then there was me, Lauren, reliable, quiet, the one who colored inside the lines and didn't ask for much. I got good grades, I never got in trouble. I moved away to go to college in Oregon, studied graphic design, and stayed because for the first time I wasn't Rachel's sister or Dylan's big sister. I was just me. I built a good life in Portland cozy apartment, a rescue cat named Charlie, a job I loved that eventually turned into a leadership role. I had friends who felt more like family than the people I was born to. But every time I came home, it was like stepping back into a shadow. No matter what I had accomplished, the moment I walked through my parents' front door, I became invisible again. My mom would go on about Rachel's latest accolades or Dylan's newest mess, and my dad, kind but distracted, would pat my shoulder and ask how that drawing job was going. He never remembered I was leading a whole creative team. Family gatherings were their own quiet punishment. 2 years ago at Thanksgiving, I was squeezed onto the corner of the kids' table while Dylan's latest girlfriend, who'd been around for all of 3 weeks, got a seat next to my mom. Last Christmas, everyone had handmade stockings by the fireplace except me. Mine looked like it came from the gas station around the corner. When I brought it up, my mother just laughed and said, "Oh, Lauren, don't be so sensitive." Still, I kept showing up, hoping it would be different, hoping they'd finally notice I'd grown into someone worth being proud of. So when the invitation came for their 40th anniversary celebration, I marked it on my calendar like it mattered. I commissioned a glass artist I loved to create a piece with their wedding colors, delicate, thoughtful, beautiful. I wrapped it carefully, packed it into my car, and drove 6 hours with the hope that maybe, just maybe this time, I'd be more than a guest in my own family. I didn't stay at their house. I had learned that lesson the hard way. My mother always pulled me into prep work from the moment I arrived while Rachel and Dylan floated in last minute smiling and camera ready. So I booked a hotel, another quiet boundary. That night I laid out my navy blue dress, curled my hair, even stopped for a professional makeup touch-up. I wanted to show up not just present, but prepared, like someone who deserved to be there. And the next evening, I walked into the Sapphire Room 30 minutes early, ready to help, ready to celebrate, ready to finally be seen. What I didn't know was that the room they had waiting for me wasn't where the celebration was happening. It was what they called the overflow. I stepped through the restaurant's front entrance, holding the gift bag carefully in one hand, the tissue paper still neat, the glass sculpture nestled inside. The Sapphire Room was even more beautiful than I remembered. Tall windows catching the last of the sunlight, the crystal chandeliers glowing soft gold across polished floors. Everything looked perfect. My mother spotted me right away and walked over with a clipboard in her hand and that brisk, efficient smile she wore at every family event. "Lauren, there you are," she said, air kissing the side of my face, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "Don't you look lovely? Could you help the florist with the centerpieces? A few of them are looking a little sparse." I managed a happy anniversary. Mom, as I gave her a quick hug, her sequined silver dress sparkled under the lights. She barely returned the embrace, already looking toward the back of the room. Heather found the venue, she added, scanning her checklist. "She knows the owner. About those flowers, just fluff them a bit." The florist didn't need any help. The arrangements were full and well-balanced, but I adjusted a few anyway. From where I stood, I had a clear view of the entrance. I watched as Rachel walked in with her husband and their 3 kids, each of them dressed like they'd stepped out of a catalog. My mom lit up the second she saw them, arms outstretched, cooing over the grandkids and fussing over Rachel's dress. Uncle Ray and Aunt Susan followed. Then my cousin Josh, the one who used to tease me relentlessly as a kid. Even Brandon showed up, my dad's nephew, who'd stolen $800 from their bedroom years ago during a family reunion. Everyone knew it, and he'd admitted it eventually. But here he was, slipping into the main room like nothing had happened. Dylan showed up last, of course. For once, he actually looked put together. Dark suit, new haircut. I'd heard he was working with Dad's construction company now. That alone had earned him a fresh wave of praise lately. I felt a hand on my shoulder. "There's our girl," my dad said, giving me a side hug. The same aftershave he'd worn since I was little clung to his suit. "Glad you made it." "How was the drive long?" I said, smiling. "But worth it." "Happy anniversary, Dad." He looked around the room pleased. 40 years. Can you believe it? Your mother's been planning this thing for months. Wait until you see the cake. People were beginning to find their seats, and I figured it was time to find mine. I walked over to where my mom was checking her clipboard again. "Hey, where am I sitting?" I asked. "I don't see a place card for me." She barely looked up. "Oh, we had to make some adjustments. You'll be in the little side room off the kitchen." "The side room," I repeated. "It's for extended family," she said quickly. "We just didn't have room in here for everyone." Before I could respond, she was already walking toward the back of the restaurant. I followed her past the main dining tables through a service hallway and into a small space off to the side plane with mismatched chairs and a folding table covered in a white cloth. A few leftover flowers sat in a vase that didn't match anything in the main room. There were boxes stacked in the corner, and the concrete floor had a rug thrown over it that didn't quite reach the edges. "Here we are," she said, as if she were giving me a tour of a guest suite. I looked around the room, then back at her. "Mom, why am I sitting out here? I'm your daughter." She gave a tight smile. "We simply couldn't fit everyone in the main room." "Don't be difficult. I need to get back. Guests are still arriving." She turned and walked out before I could say anything else. I sat down at the table, stunned. The light overhead was harsh, buzzing slightly. Through the open doorway to the kitchen, I could see servers moving back and forth, carrying trays and glasses, their expressions tight with focus. I reached for my phone and texted my friend Diana. "You're not going to believe this." They seated me in a back room, literally next to the kitchen. She texted back right away. "Wait, what? Are you serious?" "Yep. Mom said it's for extended family, but everyone else, including Brandon, is seated up front." "That's insane. What are you going to do?" I didn't know. I stayed there as more people trickled in. My dad's coworker and his wife, a couple my mom had once mentioned from Minnesota, even a college intern from the construction company. Everyone looked just as confused as I felt, sharing awkward glances as they realized they weren't in the real party. Appetizers came out, but by the time they reached our table, the plates looked like leftovers, half empty and lukewarm. Through the doorway, I could see the main room glowing with candles and laughter. Rachel was standing with her hand on one of her daughter's shoulders, smiling at something Dylan said. My dad raised his glass to toast. Cameras flashed. I looked down at the gift I had spent weeks picking out. That hand-blown glass sculpture that cost nearly $300, wrapped carefully in silver paper, a symbol of family of unity. I had chosen it so thoughtfully. My dad's voice echoed from the main room. Elaine and I want to thank you all for coming tonight. 40 years of marriage, we're proud of this family and everything we've built. Their family. The one that sat at the proper tables, raising glasses in the candlelight. Not me. I watched from the back room, surrounded by strangers and silence. The difference between the two spaces wasn't just in decor, it was in meaning. The main room was for those who mattered. And this was where they put the people they didn't know what to do with. The thought wouldn't leave me. It was like someone had finally said out loud what I'd spent years trying not to believe. I glanced around again, at the cracked floor, the boxes pushed behind a screen, the half-finished flower arrangement that didn't match anything else. Then I stood up. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I knew I wasn't going to sit quietly in the garage while my parents toasted 40 years of love and legacy without me. I stood there in that side room, still holding the gift bag in my lap, my dress bunching under me on the folding chair. The hum from the kitchen was steady, and the door swung open every few minutes as servers came through with fresh trays for the main dining room. I kept catching glimpses Rachel laughing with her husband Dylan, clapping my dad on the back, guests raising glasses toward the head table. The kind of moment people frame in photo albums. But not me. I wasn't in any of it. At the table around me, a few more people had trickled in, my dad's coworker and his wife, a couple from Minnesota, I vaguely remembered from some Christmas years ago, and the adult son of our longtime neighbors. They all looked just as unsure about where they were and why. We smiled politely at each other, not much to say. One of the servers came in with a tray of appetizers. They were half gone, like someone had grabbed the best of them before they ever reached our table. She placed the tray down and gave me a small apologetic look before hurrying out again. I glanced through the door again. There was my family, my parents, my siblings, aunts and uncles, all of them seated under soft lighting with linen napkins and stemmed glassware. My dad raised his glass again. The room quieted. "We're so thankful to have you all here tonight," he said. 40 years of marriage. And the family that's come from it, that's what we're most proud of. The words hung in the air. I looked around at the others seated with me, none of them part of that family. Not really. I was the only one in that room who shared a last name with the couple being toasted. I looked down at the gift bag again. The silver paper had started to wrinkle where I'd clutched it too tightly. The card tucked into the ribbon was still there with a message I'd spent real time on. Thoughtful, hopeful. I'd meant every word when I wrote it. I sat back in the chair and folded my hands in my lap. For a long time, I didn't move. I just sat there listening. The sound of clinking glass and soft laughter floated in from the main room, muffled by the kitchen door. A chair scraped. Someone toasted again. I could hear my mother's voice, warm and animated, probably retelling the story of how she and my dad met. I'd heard it so many times. At every anniversary, every holiday, every time someone new joined the family and asked. I wasn't in that story either. It wasn't just about the seating. It was everything that came before it. The years of being the one who didn't need anything, the one who could be counted on to step aside when Rachel needed attention or Dylan needed a bailout. The birthdays that were forgotten, the calls that came too late or didn't come at all. The holidays where my name was an afterthought in the gift exchange, if it made the list at all. The stocking that showed up late last Christmas still had the price tag stuck to it. I thought about the calls I made when I got promoted, when I bought my condo, when I adopted Charlie. I remembered the quick replies, The way the conversation always circled back to Rachel's kids or Dylan's latest job. Always something else, someone else. Always something more important. The light flickered above me. One of the chairs wobbled slightly under the woman next to me. She adjusted it and smiled politely. I smiled back, and then I stood up. I didn't plan to. I didn't rehearse anything in my head. I just stood up, smoothed the front of my dress, and picked up the gift bag. My heels echoed against the floor as I walked toward the open doorway. I stepped back into the hallway. A server passed me with a tray of wine glasses. I waited for him to go by, then turned the corner and walked straight into the main dining room. My father was still standing near the head table. The mic was in his hand, but he hadn't resumed speaking. He turned when he saw me. "Lauren," he said. "Everything all right?" I kept walking until I stood right in front of him across the table from my mother. "No, Dad." "Not really," I said. My voice didn't shake. The room was quiet now. Chairs creaked slightly as people shifted. My mother's smile was gone, replaced by something tighter, more controlled. "I just wanted to bring your gift before I leave." Her eyes narrowed. "Lauren, this really isn't the time." "It's fine," I said. "Won't take long." I set the gift bag down in the center of the table. The silver wrapping caught the light. My mother glanced at it, then back at me. "You seated me in the garage," I said quietly. "Everyone else is here, including Brandon. But I'm in the back, next to the kitchen." My dad's brow furrowed. "What do you mean the garage?" I looked at him. "That side room. That's where I've been all night." He looked genuinely confused. "She said it was for extended family," I added, looking at my mother now. "But I'm your daughter, not a neighbor, not a coworker, not someone's plus one. I'm family." "Lauren." "This isn't helping," she said under her breath. "We had space constraints." I gestured toward the 4 empty chairs at the back of the room. "Really?" I asked. "You had room for Brandon, but not for me." He cleared his throat. "Elaine, did you seat her back there?" "She offered," she said quickly. "She said she didn't mind." I didn't say that, I replied. I never said that. My father looked from me to my mother, back to me again. I had no idea, he said slowly. "I thought you were just running late. When I asked where you were, she said you were helping with something." I turned to leave. "Wait," he said. "Please, don't go. I think I've said enough." Behind me, I could hear Rachel shift in her seat. "Lauren, I thought you requested to sit out there," she said, her voice uncertain. "That's what Mom told me." I looked at her, then at Dylan, who was sitting quietly, his brow furrowed. The room stayed silent. My mother's hands were flat on the table. For a second, no one moved. Then my dad pulled out a chair at the head table. "Lauren," he said, motioning to the seat next to him, "please sit down." I looked down at the chair my father had pulled out white cushion-carved wood, just like all the others around the head table. My mother didn't say anything, just kept her hands still on the tablecloth. Her fingers curled slightly. I didn't move. "Lauren," my dad said again, a little quieter this time. "Please." I stood there a second longer, then slowly stepped forward and sat down. The room remained quiet, forks resting on napkins, eyes turning back to their plates. A moment later, my dad leaned toward me and said under his breath, "Will you come outside for a minute? Just you and me?" I nodded. We stepped out of the main room and walked through the same hallway I'd used earlier past the kitchen entrance. When we reached the back parking lot, the air was cooler than before. The sun was almost gone, just a soft orange line along the horizon. He turned to me. "I didn't know," he said. "About the room, about any of it." I looked at him. "She walked me there herself." He shook his head. "I asked your mother where you were earlier, and she told me you were helping the florist. I figured you'd be along any minute." He rubbed the back of his neck. "I should have checked. I'm sorry." Neither of us spoke for a while. The sound of passing traffic echoed faintly in the distance. "I can't tell you why she did that," he said after a moment, "but it's not right." I glanced back toward the restaurant. She told Rachel I asked to sit out there, told Dylan I was coming late. None of that's true. He took a step back, leaned against the railing. "You think she was trying to keep you out of the main room? I don't know what to think." He looked down at the pavement, then back at me. "You deserve better than that." I crossed my arms, the chill settling on my skin. "It's not just tonight. This has been going on for years." He didn't argue. He just nodded slowly. "I thought I was imagining it," I said. "I thought maybe I was being too sensitive." He met my eyes. "No, you weren't." We stood there for another few moments. The sound of a door opening behind us caught my attention. My mother stepped outside. She stopped just under the awning and didn't come closer. "What is going on?" she asked, voice low but tense. "Dinner's getting cold." My father didn't answer right away. Then he turned toward her. "Why did you seat Lauren in the back room?" She stiffened. "I told you, it was a last-minute change. Who made that change?" She glanced at me. We didn't have enough room. The seating chart was complicated. "There are empty chairs," he said. I counted 4. My mother's expression didn't change. It wasn't personal. "You told Rachel I asked to sit out there," I said quietly. "You told Dylan I wasn't coming." She looked at me, then back at my father. My dad took a breath. "Why, Elaine?" My mother hesitated. Then her voice dropped. "She's always been different." He blinked. "Different how she moved away, built a life without us. It's like she never needed anyone." I stared at her. "I call, I visit, I flew in for your anniversary, I brought a gift." Her eyes flickered. "You've always had your own path. You never needed the same things your brother and sister did. That doesn't mean I wanted to be left out." There was a silence between the three of us, heavy but still. My father's voice broke it. "You remind her of Judith," he said. I turned toward him. "Your sister." "My mother's sister," he corrected gently. "They were close once, but Judith left the family when they were young, moved out of state, never looked back." My mother spoke again, this time quieter. "She chased her own life. Everyone thought she was brave. I stayed. I did everything that was expected, but she was always the one people admired." I looked at her, unsure what to say. "I see pieces of her in you," she added, "and sometimes it's hard." My father straightened. "That doesn't excuse tonight." My mother nodded once. "No, it doesn't." The light above us buzzed faintly. My father looked back at me. "Would you come back in? I'll fix the seating. You'll sit with us." I glanced at my mother. She was still standing stiffly, but her gaze wasn't as sharp now. "I'll come back in," I said. "But I'm not pretending everything's fine. No one's asking you to." We walked back into the restaurant together. The hush in the main room returned as we entered, but this time my father didn't pause. He walked straight to the head table and pulled out a chair between his own and Dylan's. "This one's for Lauren," he said. My mother didn't object. The servers moved quickly to bring over a place setting. The plates and glasses matched the others exactly. It looked like I'd been seated there all along. The conversation around the room slowly resumed. I could feel eyes on me, but I kept my gaze on my water glass as it was poured. My father gave my hand a brief touch before reaching for his napkin. I didn't speak. I just sat. But for the first time that evening, I didn't feel like I was standing on the outside of something I was supposed to belong to. The dinner continued around me, soft clinking of cutlery and the low hum of conversation filling the air. I sat at the head table now, between my father and Dylan. Across from me, Rachel kept her eyes on her plate, her shoulders tight. My place setting was flawless: linen napkin, polished silverware, the same floral china as everyone else. It was everything the side room hadn't been. My mother explained the seating switch to a few curious guests who leaned in to ask, brushing it off as a misunderstanding. Her smile never faltered, but the tension behind it was clear. My father kept one hand resting lightly on the table beside mine, never saying much, just steady. Every so often he'd glance over at me, not with pity, but something closer to awareness. I picked at my food, not really tasting it. Every time I lifted my glass, I could feel someone's eyes flicker toward me. I kept my head level, my voice quiet when I joined in small talk with the guests nearest me. It felt like walking a line I didn't want to slip from, still part of the room, but not quite rooted in it. The first real surprise came after the plates were cleared. Brandon approached our table. He stood at the edge, one hand gripping the back of a chair. He cleared his throat and looked at me. "Lauren, can I talk to you for a minute?" My father looked over at him but didn't say anything. I gave a small nod and followed Brandon toward the corner of the room near the tall windows. The view of the city lights blurred against the glass. He looked unsure. I wanted to say something. I waited. "I didn't know you were out there, in that room." If I had, I would have said something, or switched honestly. I raised an eyebrow. "You would have switched?" He nodded slowly. "I think so. I know I've messed up with the family before, but I've been trying to fix it. I've been sober 3 years now." I blinked. "You're in recovery?" "Yeah. I paid back what I took from your parents. All of it. With interest." He looked down for a second. "Your mom's actually been kind. More than I deserved, probably." That caught me off guard. She never told me that. I'm not surprised. He paused. "Anyway, I just wanted to say I see what happened tonight, and it wasn't right. You've always been more family than me. That's all." I nodded. "Thanks." He gave a small nod back and slipped away. I returned to the table, and before I could sit down again, Dylan met me near the dessert display. He looked awkward, one hand in his pocket. "Hey, I didn't know Mom had put you out there. She told me you weren't staying long." I didn't respond. "I guess I haven't really paid attention," he admitted. "I've kind of been in my own messes." I looked at him. "Yeah, I know." He gave a small shrug. "I'm sorry. I should have noticed." The apology sat between us for a moment before I nodded. "Okay." He went back to his seat, and I returned to mine just in time for the dessert plates to arrive. Rachel approached a little while later. She stopped behind my chair, one hand resting gently on the back of it. "I should have asked you directly," she said quietly, "about the seating. I had a weird feeling when Mom said you asked to be out there. It didn't sit right. You didn't ask." She shook her head. "I didn't, and that's on me." I didn't reply. "I've benefited from a lot of the attention in this family," she said, "and I've never really questioned it, but I'm thinking about it now. I just wanted you to know that." The cake came out not long after 3 tiers with white roses and silver piping. My parents stood to cut it, smiling at the camera's arms around each other. And then my dad turned to me. "Lauren," he said loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "get up here with us." I hesitated, then stood. He took my hand and pulled me to stand between him and my mother. Her smile remained, but her fingers brushed mine slightly as she adjusted her grip on the cake knife. I couldn't read the gesture fully. It wasn't warmth, but it wasn't rejection either. "Let's get one with all 3 kids," my father called out. Rachel and Dylan joined us. The photographer directed us to stand closer. Flash after flash lit up the moment. I held my expression steady, not forcing a smile, not shrinking back. Later, as the party wound down, my father found me near the coat check. Guests were beginning to leave, hugging, exchanging goodbyes. "Would you come by the house tomorrow?" he asked. "Before you head back," I looked at him. "I think we need to talk more. As a family." I nodded slowly. "I'll come, but I'm not pretending it's all fine." "I wouldn't expect you to," he said, "but I'd like us to start somewhere." That night when I got back to the hotel, I took off my shoes and called Diana. She answered on the second ring. "Well," she asked. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt once. When I finished, she said, "That's not small, Lauren. That's the first time you didn't walk away. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I had." The next morning, I parked across the street from my parents' house and sat for a moment before getting out. The neighborhood looked exactly as it always had. The same trimmed hedges, the same wind chimes on the porch, the same flag fluttering from the mailbox. But something about stepping onto the driveway felt different. My dad opened the door before I even knocked. "Coffee's fresh," he said, giving a small smile. "Come on in." The living room was tidy, just like always. The scent of citrus cleaner lingered faintly mixed with brewed coffee and something baking in the oven. I followed him through the hall into the kitchen. Rachel and Dylan were already seated at the table, each with a mug in front of them. My mother stood at the counter folding a dish towel with careful precision. "Good morning," she said without turning around. "Morning," I replied, setting my purse on the back of a chair. We all sat. My dad poured coffee into an empty mug and handed it to me. "We figured we'd talk a bit before you hit the road." I nodded. There was a long pause before he spoke again. "I've been thinking a lot since last night about everything that came up." Rachel shifted in her seat. Dylan looked down at the table. "I don't know how we let things get so uneven," my dad said, "but I know now that we did." My mother finally sat down, her hands folded on the table. She didn't speak. "When you moved to Portland," he continued, "we just assumed you were fine. You were always capable, always figuring things out." I stirred my coffee. I was capable because I had to be. He nodded slowly. "I see that now." Another pause. Rachel looked up. "Last night, I realized I've never really asked you about your life. Not directly. I just relied on whatever Mom shared." My mother kept her gaze fixed on the tabletop. "I'm sorry," Rachel added, "for not being more present." "I appreciate that," I said. Dylan leaned forward. "I've been selfish. I always figured the chaos in my life demanded more attention, and honestly, I let it. I didn't think about how that affected you." He glanced at me, then back down. "I'm not proud of it," he said, "but I'm trying to change that." I let the words settle before responding. I know all of us have had our own things, but it's been years of being left out, and after a while you stop expecting it to change. "I'm not asking for a perfect solution," I added. "I just want to feel like I belong here." Finally, my mother spoke. "I never meant to make you feel like an outsider." I looked at her. "I really didn't," she said, "but I can see now that I did. That night, the seating, it wasn't thoughtful. I was trying to manage too many details and made a poor choice. You told people I asked to sit out there," I said quietly. She paused. "That was wrong. I shouldn't have done that. It wasn't a long speech, but it was more than I'd heard before." She turned slightly in her chair. "I've been thinking about my own mother a lot, how she treated my sister and me." We waited. "She always favored Judith, said she was special. I was the one who stayed home, helped with the house, helped with Dad after he got sick. But when people asked about our family, she always brought up Judith first." No one interrupted. "I think when you left for school and then built this life that didn't revolve around us, I saw it as the same thing happening all over again." She looked at me, but it wasn't. "I understand that now." I didn't speak. I just listened. She reached for her mug but didn't drink. "I should have visited. Should have learned more about your work. It wasn't intentional neglect, but it still hurt you." My father cleared his throat. "I want us to move forward, Lauren. Not ignore the past, but learn from it. If you're willing." I nodded. "That's all I've wanted." We stayed around the table for a while longer, talking through a few memories, some good, some harder. It wasn't a full reconciliation, but it was something real, something new. When I stood to leave, my mother walked me to the door. She didn't hug me, but she said, "Drive safe, and let me know when you get home." I promised I would. The drive back to Portland felt lighter than the one before. I didn't replay the party or the side room. I didn't run through conversations wondering what I should have said differently. Back in my apartment, I found a small envelope in the bottom of my purse, the one that had held the card for the anniversary gift. I hadn't planned to reread it, but I sat down at the kitchen counter and opened it anyway. It still said the same thing, to 40 years, for the bond that holds even when it bends. I placed it on the fridge under a magnet and went to unpack my suitcase. What came next didn't happen overnight, but it did begin. In the weeks that followed, little things began to shift. It started with a phone call. My dad rang me on a Wednesday afternoon, no particular reason, just to check in. "Thought I'd see how work's going," he said. We talked for nearly 20 minutes. He asked about the projects I was leading, even remembered the name of a client I'd mentioned once before. When we hung up, he said, "Proud of you, kiddo." A few days later, a text came through from Rachel. Just a simple photo of her garden, followed by "Thinking of you today. Hope your week's going okay." I stared at it for a while before typing back, "Thanks. Looks beautiful. Charlie would love to nap there." The rhythm was slow and sometimes awkward, but it kept going. One message became two. She started asking for design tips. Nothing big, just ideas for her kids' school posters or help picking fonts for a bake sale flyer. The conversations moved from quick exchanges to longer threads. Even Dylan called one evening. "I'm taking a welding class," he said out of nowhere. "That's great," I replied. "I'm trying to stay busy," he added, "not screw things up again." I said I'm glad to hear that. And I was. Then something happened that hadn't happened in over a decade. My parents came to visit. They flew into Portland on a Thursday and stayed through the weekend. I cleaned the apartment, made a list of places we could eat, even fluffed Charlie's bed under the windowsill. When they arrived, my dad hugged me at the door. My mom stepped in a little more slowly. She looked around. "This is nice," she said. "I don't know why we didn't do this sooner." I smiled. "Me neither." We toured my office downtown. I showed them the open layout, the whiteboards filled with campaign ideas, the corner where my team kept a jar of client catchphrases that had gone accidentally viral. My dad took pictures. My mom nodded through the walkthrough, asked polite questions. She didn't say much, but she was there. And she listened. That night over dinner, she handed me a small envelope. I opened it and found a card. Inside was a single line written in her handwriting. "Congratulations on the new client. Your father said it was a big one." She had underlined "congratulations." I looked up at her. She didn't meet my eyes, just sipped her water and moved on to a new topic. But she had written it and given it to me. Later that weekend, after they'd left for the airport, I stood in the living room for a long time looking at that card. It wasn't everything, but it was something. We kept going like that, week by week, call by call. It didn't fix everything. Sometimes my mom still drifted back into old patterns, interrupting me to talk about Rachel's kids, changing the subject when things got emotional. But now I gently redirected her, and more often than not, she adjusted. My dad was more consistent. He called regularly and sometimes left voicemails if I didn't pick up. He started asking if he could send Charlie toys, even though I reminded him the cat preferred cardboard boxes. Rachel and I began to talk more not just about our parents, but about books we'd read, shows we were watching. She invited me to her daughter's choir concert on Zoom. I logged in and stayed the whole hour. Rachel sent a thank you text the next morning. Then one evening I got a call from Dylan. "You busy?" he asked. "Not really. Just wanted to say thanks for calling me out a little. That night after the party, I didn't like hearing it, but I needed to." I paused. "I appreciate you saying that." "I'm doing better," he said. "It's not perfect, but I'm trying. We talked for another 10 minutes before he signed off with, "Take care, sis." 6 months passed. Then came my dad's birthday. It was a smaller dinner this time, just immediate family back at the house. I flew in that morning, and when I walked in, I saw the dining table already set, cloth napkins, candles lit, and place cards. I scanned the names. Mine was next to my dad's, his right hand. I looked at my mom. She gave a small nod. Not dramatic, just quiet acknowledgement. We all sat down. The food was simple roast chicken, mashed potatoes, rolls, warmed in the oven. The kind of meal we'd had dozens of times before. But something about that night felt different. People listened. People asked questions. No one talked over anyone else. And for the first time in a long time, there wasn't a spotlight. There was just room. Room for all of us. The candles flickered as my father leaned back in his chair and looked around the table. Wouldn't trade this for anything he said. No one replied. We didn't need to. After dinner, we all stayed at the table longer than usual. No one rushed to clear the plates. Rachel refilled coffee mugs. Dylan passed around the pie. My dad leaned back in his chair, smiling like he could have stayed right there all night. And my mom, she didn't say much, but she didn't look distracted. She was present. When I stood to help carry dishes into the kitchen, my dad reached for my hand. "I hope you know," he said, "how proud I am of the life you've built." I nodded. "I think I do now." He gave my hand a squeeze, then let go. Later, when I was getting ready to leave, Rachel walked with me out to the car. It was cold, the kind of quiet Idaho night that wrapped around you like an old quilt. She hugged me before I opened the door. "I'm glad you came," she said. "I am too." She paused. "I'm going to keep trying." "I know." I drove back to the hotel in the dark. The streets were empty. The moon was out. It felt peaceful in a way I hadn't expected. In the weeks that followed, I didn't expect everything to change, and it didn't. But the small things, the calls, the cards, the tiny acknowledgments kept coming, and I let them. What I learned through all of this wasn't about finally getting recognition or hearing the exact apology I wanted. It wasn't even about being seated at the right table. It was about knowing I didn't have to keep shrinking to fit someone else's comfort. Speaking up that night wasn't easy, but it opened a door that had been closed for a long time, not just between me and my parents, but between the version of myself that had always waited quietly and the one who knew she deserved to be heard. Sometimes we don't need a grand gesture or a dramatic reconciliation. Sometimes we just need that first shift, one honest moment where someone really sees us. And sometimes we have to be the one who makes it happen. If any part of this story reminded you of your own, you're not alone. And you don't have to wait for someone else to change. You're allowed to speak up, to take your seat, to say, "This isn't enough for me." And if you've ever done that even once, I hope you know how brave that was. Thanks for listening. If this story stayed with you, I'd love for you to share your thoughts in the comments, or maybe even your own story. And if you want to hear more stories like this one, I hope you'll subscribe and stay a while. You deserve a seat at the table, always.